Innovators Journey, the show where we go behind the bold ideas and breakthrough moments with authors, creators, storytellers whose work leaves a lasting mark on the world. I'm Nick Franck. Today I'm excited to be joined by Libby Hellmann, an award-winning author and publisher of 18 novels and over 30 short stories spanning contemporary crime thrillers and historical fiction. Libby has built a career not just on writing compelling narratives, but on navigating this ever-changing landscape of publishing kind of on her own terms. Libby, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, okay. Well, across your novels, your many novels, readers often note these themes of justice and moral complexity and some suspense. When you look back at your body of work as a whole, what are the ideas and questions that you seem to like to write about because they just recur often?
Morally shadowy personalities. No one is all good or all bad, even the detective. The detective is not the savior in my novels. The detective or the protagonist sometimes does things that they would not be proud of. Their mothers would not be proud of them. And so I like that kind of balance between good and bad.
Yeah. One of the things that really stands out specific about your novels is how you write about women and kind of the edge, right? Like they're out of options, they're end of the ropes, they're kind of pushed to these limits. You know, where does that take you when you're thinking about writing these characters and why you have kind of maybe a passion for writing characters like that?
I do, because so many women feel that way. The first time that it was explained to me was at a women's prison. I was doing an event talking about my third book, which was called An Image of Death, that had been made available to a group of women's prisoners. It was a minimum security place. I'll never forget the clang of the door behind me when I went in. They said to me when it got to their turn to talk, "You were telling our story. You were telling exactly what we went through." And I realized that these were women who had been they had run out of options in their lives. And they were forced against the wall to do things that weren't legal. It might have been drugs, it might have been they were couriers, they may have been abused. And it started me thinking about, well, yeah, that's really kind of what women go through a lot in life. And while I did not go through those experiences, it seemed to me that it was worth talking about them to see how far someone would go when they feel like they are out of options. How far would you go, Nick?
Right. Well, I'm thinking about that, like you as the author writing these novels and then having this experience of going to the prison and hearing that. What was that like for you to hear that, you know, what you're writing is connecting and the characters you're writing? Because I know a lot of writers, they struggle to write about a certain perspective, especially if you haven't lived it. And so to hear that, what did that validate to you as an author?
Well, you know, third-party reinforcement is always the best kind of compliment I can get. When someone objective who doesn't really know me and doesn't have any reason to say it says something complimentary or says, "Yeah, you got it, you're right on." I was flattered. I was honored, actually, to have been taken seriously.
Yeah. And especially as someone who you and I have chatted about this a little bit earlier, is that you didn't necessarily love writing when you first started. And so to hear that validation of someone who's like, gosh, like I didn't like doing this. And now the characters are relating to the people that I'm writing about. But now you've grown to love it over, you know, or at least I like to think you've grown to love it since you've written so much. But like, when did that mindset for you kind of shift to like, oh, I don't like doing this to now?
It was gradual. And over the years, and I've been in this writing biz, you know, about 25 years now. And to be quite honest, the first book I wrote was not the first book that was published. The fourth book I wrote was the first book to be published. So I needed to learn the craft of fiction, but I was never very confident about it. And even when my first book was published through an agent, traditional publishing, I'll never be able to do that again. I don't know. That was a fluke, you know. It wasn't me. And as I went on, and particularly when I started to write historical novels, things started to change because, well, first of all, I found historical novels a little bit easier to write than contemporary because I did so much research. I was a history major in college, and I'm used to doing research, and I love doing research because, to me, information is power. And the more information I had, the better. But in terms of writing, information was really almost a plot structure. Since I was writing about, and I am writing about, volatile situations in recent history, if I make a chronology of the timeline that I wanted to write about, that almost was the plot. And so in that sense, it was a little bit easier for me, and I kind of rolled with that and found, yeah, well, this isn't so bad. This is kind of fun, to match history and then to come up with characters who were just ordinary people, but they were up against extraordinary events. That I really did enjoy that. And so I'm back writing a contemporary right now, so I'm kind of, I'm trying to not feel the imposter syndrome.
I feel it all the time when I'm talking with individuals. I think no matter if you've written 20 books, 100 books, like I'm sure even people like, I don't know, Stephen King probably still feels it from time to time, right?
I think every time an author starts a book, they take a deep breath and say, okay, here I go again. Man, I hope they're not going to find out what a fluke I am.
How do you, I'm so curious, like, as the history major and you have so many events throughout time that you can kind of draw from, where do you find your inspiration for like, okay, this is the time period that I want to drop a character into? Like, where does that come from? And then how do you balance like, okay, this is a real event that happened, but not a real story that's happening within that. So how do you balance like keeping it lightly historically accurate with then your story?
More than light. When I would write about police procedure in my contemporary novels, I was always told, you better get it right, or else police or law enforcement are going to throw your book against the wall and say she doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, in history, when I'm writing about history, I kind of feel the same way. I better get it right. Even some of the more complex situations, someone's going to throw my book against the wall and say she doesn't know what she's talking about. So I'm pretty meticulous, or I try to be, when I'm writing the historicals as I was when I would be writing law enforcement stuff.
Is there any particular time period that you go back to, or you just like love to write?
Yes, I like writing about the 20th century. I think part of it is because I was alive for half of it. And I think the other part is just that when we took history in school and even in college, I always was kind of drawn to the events that have happened since World War II. Sure. Because I wanted to find out more about them. And I wanted to find, it really began because I really wanted to find out what it was that keeps society, mankind, repeating the same mistakes, or maybe not exactly the same mistakes, but close enough. And it seems to go in cycles, maybe 30-year cycles, 40-year cycles, but the same things keep happening. Why haven't we learned? Why can't we learn? You read about it and you say, we should have learned, we should have, could have, would have done it differently, but we don't. Why not? And it's just a fascinating conundrum that I never get tired of thinking about.
Right. Learn from our history or we are doomed to repeat it, right? Life happens in interesting ways. Libby, for anyone who might be just discovering like your works, like what do you hope readers take away from the stories that you write?
That's an interesting question. I hope they come away with lack of sleep because they couldn't put the book down. But I hope they come away with a nuanced look at whatever issue I'm tackling, that there's light and there's dark, there's good and there's bad, and that it's not so easy to make assumptions or to categorize someone or some situation, that there's a lot of factors that go into it. That's what I hope. And I also hope that they buy the next book in the series.
Well, and if folks want to buy your books, where's the best place to find them?
Amazon has them, Barnes & Noble, any of the book retailers. Independent bookstores have some of them, libraries have some of them, and they can buy everything at my store, which is store.libbyhellmann.com, and everything is in a bundle, but they're all discounted prices. So they have a choice.
Well, Libby, thank you so much for coming on, sharing about your process, and talking about your books with me today.
Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, hey, if this episode inspired you, follow the show, share it with someone who believes great storytelling is worth the work. Once again, thank you to Libby Hellmann for joining me. I'm Nick Franck, and we'll catch you for the next Innovators Journey.